Hearthstone has always had a hard time fitting into the ultra-skilled, super serious world of esports. It's hard to put yourself next to League of Legends or Rocket League when one of the key tenets of your game is randomness. While it has certainly never been as purely skill-based as something like chess, Hearthstone has largely avoided periods where it was a total clown fiesta. But for 1 week in 2021 at a $250,000 tournament, it was hard to argue otherwise. Deck of Lunacy is key to all of this and was initially laughed at in card reviews due to how bad replacing your carefully curated deck with random cards would be. Generally, cards that generate random cards are balanced by the fact that there are actually a lot of bad or just mediocre cards in Hearthstone. But what if all of a sudden all those bad cards got purged from the game? Well, way back in 2021, that exact thing happened. While Hearthstone had always rotated old sets of cards out of the game, Hearthstone's first two sets, Classic and Basic, stayed anchored into the game for years. And outside of a few changes here and there of overly powerful cards like Ice Block or overly centralizing cards like Sylvanas, the cards had stayed mainly the same for 7 years. The issue is that as time went on, cards like Alarmobot or Gladiator's Longbow had gone from bad 7 years ago to Is that a real card? Spells especially had a bunch of stinkers like Icicle, Eye for an Eye, Blessed Champion, Mind Games. Well, in 2021, Hearthstone decided to replace the Classic and Basic sets with one big core set that would be more updated to a modern power level. This meant cutting out those 2K auto-generated players and replacing them with much more reasonable cards like Thrive in the Shadows, a cheaper version of Sprint, or just a minion like Righteous Protector. On top of this, every year Hearthstone will rotate out the oldest 3 expansions, meaning that all the weak cards from those older expansions are removed from the pool of possible random cards. Now, looking back at Deck of Lunacy, we see that it transforms spells in your deck into spells that cost 3 more. Now, while this is still random, the tiny card pool actually makes it a lot more predictable than you might think at first. In Deck of Lunacy decks, the goal would be to pick spells with costs that would only give you the best results when transformed. For example, 4-mana cards like Ring Toss or Refreshing Spring Water could only turn into Flame Strike, Soul Mirror, Cycle of Hatred, Val Guardians, Guardian Animals, Commencement, Expendable Performers, and Mask of Cthulhu. While Guardian Animals or Commencement would be tough breaks, Soul Mirror or Expendable Performers would blow the doors off any game when played for only 4 mana. 7-mana cards could only turn into Survival of the Fittest, usually mediocre unless you had some minions on the board, or the Grand Slam, which was a ludicrous amount of juice. 3-mana cards had a good chance to turn into the powerful Skull of Gul'dan or Runic Carvings. Now, if you are playing a card that transforms all the spells in your deck, to get the most amount of value possible, you want to be playing a deck of all spells. Luckily for us, a few cards designed for such a strategy had been released a few expansions ago and had mostly flown under the radar. Until now. Font of Power allowed you to add 3 mage minions to your hand for only a single mana. This meant even in a deck that has to forgo some of Mage's best cards, you can still potentially play a Jandis Barov or a Varden Dawngrasp. Jandis Barov being yet another random card that benefited from the smaller pool of cards. Apectus Blast was a 5-mana spell that dealt 5 damage, and would summon a 5-mana minion if your deck contained no minions. A very solid tempo tool that could also close out games with its direct damage. It became even sweeter when it was introduced to the main culprit, Incanter's Flow. A card that had to be nerfed on 2 separate occasions following the deck's success, it was, at this time, a 2-mana spell that reduced the cost of all spells in your deck by 1. Considering your entire deck is spells, this card alone could cheat 15 to 20 mana in a game, and if you play 2, forget about it. Having one of the highest mulligan win rates in the game, this card was a ludicrous enabler helped out by the final piece of the puzzle. Now, while these other cards were not really a problem when they were released together in Ashes of Outland, Refreshing Spring Water being released in Forged in the Barrens really was the straw that broke the camel's back. Refreshing Spring Water was released as a 4-mana card that drew 2 cards and refreshed 2 mana for each spell drawn. Past turn 4, this card was almost always a free draw 2, and let's say somehow you reduce the cost of the card, it would act as a combo extender, leaving you with more mana than before you played it. Honorable mention to Primordial Studies that could only discover Lab Partner, Astromancer Solarian, Steward of Scrolls, and Imprisoned Phoenix, making Cram Session a much more accessible draw card. This deck bursts onto the scene, and in the first week of the new expansion was placed at the top of Tier 1 in the Temple Storm meta snapshot. Such a good deck was a no-brainer to bring to Masters Tour Orgrimmar, a $250,000 tournament. The deck performed very well and was brought by every single member of the top 8, being tied for the most popular deck at the tournament. Wait a second, but if you look at the top 2 lists, these decks don't even include Deck of Lunacy. And wait, why does this say Control Priest is Tier 1 in this report? And the next one? And this other one? And the one after that? And I said Spell Mage was tied for the most popular deck at this tournament. What was the other deck?
A minion with taunt is in the way!
Oh yeah! It's been a Control Priest video the whole time. Yeah, it was actually the time that the best deck in Hearthstone just played random cards. Whew. Alright. Huge twist in the Chundo video. To the untrained eye, Deck of Lunacy Mage is the epitome of randomness in Hearthstone. But to the trained eye, it's actually pretty much just a combo deck with this random card put in, and the best versions probably don't even include it. Now Control Priest? This is a deck that really leaned into getting a bunch of random cards. Most emblematic of this random style of deck was Renew. Renew was a 1-mana spell that restored 3 health and discovered a spell. Every part of this spell was crucial to its success. While discovering a spell for 1 mana seems a lot worse than just including the spell you wanted, there was actually so few spells in Priest at the time that this could actually act as extra copies of spells you were already running 2 of. In addition, the restoring of 3 health was a lot more relevant than you would think, considering how often it would end up getting played. But how would it end up getting played so much? Well, part of that is due to Wandmaker from Skullman's Academy adding a random, there's that word again, spell to your hand. Keep in mind that at the time, the only 1-mana spells for Priest were Flash Heal, Holy Smite, Wave of Apathy, bit of a low roll, Renew, so you could play it even more often, and the also excellent Draconic Studies. Part of the Studies cycle of cards in Skullman's Academy, which ironically were a lot of what I played in 2020 instead of studying any actual hard skills. Anyway, Draconic Studies allowed Control Priest to discover a, you guessed it, random dragon from the pool of available dragons. And while not as concentrated as the pool of 1-mana spells, the only available dragons were the neutral dragons, Brightwing, random, Nozdormu, the Great Alexstrasza, Malygos the Spellweaver, Onyxia Broodmother, Ysera, Deathwing the Destroyer, Dragonmaw Skystalker, Crimson Hothead, Onyx Mage Scribe, random, Plagued Protodrake, random, Circus Amalgam, and Runaway Blackwing, alongside the Priest Dragons, which were Skeletal Dragon. Oh, that's it. Now, as you may have noticed, that list consists of mostly A, huge blowout cards, and B, cards that can generate you even more random cards to generate even more huge blowout cards. And some of these cards were already being played normally in decks like Ysera or even Onyx Mage Scribe in especially greedy lists. These decks were going crazy. Venomous Scorpid was an absolute staple for discovering a spell, and Sethic Veilweaver combined with Apotheosis, Renew, or even Holy Smite could get a huge chain of random generation going. Okay, sure, the deck has a ton of random cards, but a lot of decks could run cards that generate random cards. What makes this one so special? Well, let's take a quick look-see at Palm Reading. It discovers another random spell, but it also... well, now we have the whole loop. Play Palm Reading, discover Renew, discover another Palm Reading, discover a Soul Mirror, play Draconic Studies for free, discover an Onyx Mage Scribe for later, use Soul Mirror to clear your opponent's board, use Raise Dead to bring back their Astromancer Solarian you just summoned and maybe a Wandmaker, and maybe finish up with a Desperate Prayer and a free Flash Heal to heal back up to full. You would end up in games against Control Priest where you would be like, Yeah, I thought I had him, but then he burst me down with an Alexstrasza he got from a Skeletal Dragon he discovered from a Draconic Studies, that he got from a Wand Maker, that he got back with a Raised Dead, he got from a Palm Reading, that he got from a Renew, that he got from a Venomous Scorpid, that he... The deck was frustrating to play against, and when your opponent was on Soul Mirror number 4 of the game, people would react. But the deck was also very popular, and decks of its ilk are remembered fondly for their lengthy games with emphasis on long-term strategy and resource management. It demonstrated a division in the Hearthstone player base and what people wanted out of the game. Sure, some people might love a 30-minute game, but others just want to get the game over with on their phone, between homework problems, or on the train. Look at how popular Marvel Snap has become as a card game limited to just 6 turns and with games only taking a few minutes. In the end, it leaves Hearthstone caught in the middle as an Applebee's in a world where people only want McDonald's or a fancy steakhouse. It's a problem that Hearthstone has had from the beginning. Is this esports? Or is this a slot machine? Chundo has a Discord? I don't know, man. Chun Discord. Sorry for the inconsistent upload schedule, but I actually have a job. I'm realizing I've almost been doing this for a year, man. And wow, what a journey. And still only have 53 followers on Twitter. So if you could, and while you're at it, could you subscribe to the YouTube, please? And then the TikTok, it's fine if you don't follow the TikTok. We're still working out the kinks over at Chundo Corporate, try to figure that out. Alright, thanks for watching.